Hello, everyone. It's Aaron Breimer with Deveron UAS and the Veritas Data Insights Group. Just wanted to share some data that we've been pulling together and creating some what we feel is some rather unique insights. Specifically, this data is all around some drone imagery, some soil testing, and some silage quality. So up on my screen right now, this is a drone image from 2019 of a cornfield that was going to be taken for silage. Specifically, it's this field here. So it's a part of a larger farm, but the only piece that went for silage was this smaller piece here. So that is the drone image. It is something called NDVI. So we took that data. Now, what was interesting about this site is the farmer had a forage harvester that was equipped with John Deere's Harvest Lab. So we were able to capture the protein, which is this particular map, as well as the ADF, NDF, and starch. And like I said, or alluded to, I should say, we also had some soil test information on this field. So what we are going to just quickly go through, and I am not a silage expert, but I do like to look at data. So if there's any forage experts out there that would like to get in touch, I would love to be able to get a better understanding as to the value of some of these insights. So the first one that we're just going to look at is the NDVI. So that's the image versus the protein content. So very quickly, as you can see, as NDVI goes up, so does the protein content. Like I said, I'm going to go through these fairly quick. Here is NDVI versus ADF, which is acid digestible fiber, I believe. Once again, not a forage expert, but you can see as NDVI goes up, we tend to have something that goes up as well. I will mention when you see this grayed area, the wider the gray area, the less data points, the less confidence we have in that. So when you see something fairly wide like that, just keep that in mind. Here we have the NDVI versus NDF, which is neutral digestible fiber, I believe. You can see it's a little bit more of a U-shaped, but down here, not a whole lot of data points. The majority of the curve does seem to be that the NDVF goes up as the NDVI goes up. Here is the starch content, and you can see it starts off with the starch going up until you get to, the peak NDVI only gives you a starch of about 28%, and then starts to drop off again. We also took all of this data, the silage characteristics, and looked at the soil levels. So on this one, as phosphorus is going up, you can actually see that the protein is going up. As the soil base saturation, so this is the percent of the CEC that is in calcium, as it goes up, you can see the protein's actually coming down. This one is calcium parts per million. So this is the actual parts per million. This is not the base saturation. And you can see it's almost the exact opposite. And this has to do with the CEC, which I'll touch base in a second. But as you can see, as the soil calcium parts per million goes up, so does the protein content. And there we have the CEC, cation exchange capacity. The higher the CEC, the higher the protein. If you're interested in soil potassium, so this is the base saturation of potassium. Once with soil potassium or base saturation, as the base saturation goes up, you can see the protein is coming down. Now you're dropping from 6.9 to 6.84. It's probably not a huge swing, but once again, forage experts, feel free to reach out and let me know what parts of this is actually interesting or of value to dairy farmers or those who are making their own forage silage. Uh, Protein is potassium parts per million. You can see up to about 110. It's more or less a plateau and then starts to drop off pretty fast. This is a K to mg ratio. This particular K to mg ratio, there's different ways to calculate it, but this is potassium the percent base saturation of potassium divided by the percent base saturation of magnesium. And you can see the protein is dropping as the K to mg ratio is going up. So what this was suggesting is way down here, lower potassium, more magnesium, and then over here, more potassium over here, less potassium over here, more magnesium over here, less magnesium over there. You can see with the base saturation of magnesium, as base saturation of magnesium goes up, so does protein. Parts per million of magnesium, very similar. As magnesium goes up, so does the protein. Soil organic matter. This one I kind of understand because I know soil organic matter tends to release more nitrogen. More nitrogen is good in building protein. So I understand what should be happening here, but it is the exact opposite. If you notice, as the soil organic matter goes up, the protein content is starting to fall off. So kind of an interesting result there. Basically switching into the ADF, acid digestible fiber. There's your soil calcium base saturation. You can see the peak of the ADF seems to give you a number of around, or the peak ADF seems to occur at a base saturation of 72% calcium. There's the calcium in parts per million if you are interested. We'll ignore that. And you can see there's the CEC. Once again, going through them fairly quick. CEC is a great way to be able to tell how heavy a soil is. Well, maybe not a perfect way, but it does give us an indication. So what this is suggesting is as you get into heavier soils, your ADF seems to be coming down. There is your soil potassium in base saturation. As potassium is going up, so is your ADF. There is potassium in parts per million. Once again, you can see as it goes up, so is ADF. And K to mg ratio, this is opposite to what we're seeing with the protein, if you remember. And basically as the K to mg ratio is going up, so if you remember, over here is less potassium, more magnesium. Over here is more potassium, less magnesium. And you can see it seems to peak right around that between 0.1 and 0.11. There's the base saturation of magnesium. There's the parts per million of magnesium. Adding in a few micros, so manganese seems to have some type of a relationship going on there. There's that organic matter again. So once again, as the organic matter is getting richer, it starts to drop off. But keep in mind, that's a pretty big error bar. So I'm not sure. It doesn't look like there's a whole lot of data points way out there. Base saturation of calcium and NDF, neutral digestible fiber, I believe. You can see that 72 seems to be the sweet spot. Parts per million of calcium, that's CEC, so heavier over here, lighter with the lower number. Potassium, it tended to stay fairly static right up until about 120, and then it tends to drop off pretty quick. K to mg ratio. Once again, you can see over here, that's that lower potassium, more magnesium. Right around that 0.1 seems to be the sweet spot, or the high spot of NDF. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Remember, if you're a forage expert, reach out, let me know what you think of this stuff. Magnesium as base saturation. The peak seems to be a little bit more to the left, so a little less magnesium than we've seen with the ADF and the protein. Parts per million of magnesium. Here's that manganese again. Kind of interesting. It's opposite to the ADF. Be interested to know if that makes sense. Soil organic matter. Look at that. That really rich soil organic matter just doesn't seem to be resulting in higher ADF, NDF, or protein. And finally, the John Deere system does give us the starch number. So there is phosphorus. I didn't show a whole lot of phosphorus on the other one. There didn't seem to be real good correlation, so that's why we dropped them out of the this example. But on starch, it does seem to have a very nice relationship. These are pretty low levels of phosphorus, so I'm not sure if this is just a one-off field or if there's something else going on in this field, but kind of interesting curve. There is that base saturation of calcium. Now starch, the sweet number seems to be around 68, whereas everything else was right around that 72. There's the calcium in parts per million. Usually when we see these U-shape or V-shape curves, that's another indication that there's probably not a real strong relationship going on. You can start to see it's almost like a bit of an S-curve. Also a hint to us that the relationship doesn't seem to be holding real strong because different things are in play. There's the potassium in parts per million, that K to mg ratio. Once again, that S-curve would suggest this is not having a major impact. That's based on the experience we've had in the past. Now here's that manganese again, but opposite to the ADF and NDF. As manganese goes up, so does starch. And then soil organic matter. Now look at this. Finally, we see soil organic matter having an upward indication. As soil organic matter goes up, so does the starch. So be interesting to know how this adds value to farmers making forage. And then did add one in for another micro. Only starch really showed a relationship, and that just seemed to be as zinc levels go up, the starch number was coming down. So that's what I've got. We'll share more information as we get it. But if you're a forage expert or a dairy farmer and you'd be interested in having a chat about this, I would love to hear from you. Thank you very much.